Texas professor fails entire class from graduating claiming they used ChatGPT. The ability to cheat on written assignments has always been a possibility. With the rise of the internet, it became easier to source it from more places, with a counterbalancing rise of plagiarism detectors. Now with Google, Grammarly and Chat, it is trivial to copy-paste a pipeline with enough entropy to defeat many if not most detectors. I suspect the next generation of tools will be finished this cycle. We won't be able to build an arbitrary text distinguisher that works with acceptable accuracy. Educators have to adapt. If you want to know what someone knows, then ask them face to face, or have them write it down on paper. We used to call these tests and they work pretty well. If you want someone to produce a piece of writing about something, how they produced it is less important than the result. If it is correct, clear, and gets the job done, then good. It's be the same for programming assignments. Copilot and Chat make all unproctored creation assignments a black box. You can evaluate the output, but it is nearly impossible to know what's in the box.
If you want someone to produce a piece of writing about something, how they produced it is less important than the result. If it is correct, clear, and gets the job done, then good. No, this fundamentally misunderstands the difference between work and pedagogy. With a work product, the end result is all that matters because it is a fundamentally new contribution for which the contribution is prized. If a marketer can get a 0.1% better conversion rate using Chat, then that's the best course of action. Pedagogy is a deliberate simulacrum of work under artificial conditions where learning is done via the process. Nobody cares that you've built the 10 millionth version of Tetris. The work product at the end of it is fundamentally uninteresting. The work product is solely there to force you to engage in the process and deliberately useless so it can be shaped towards maximal learning. Nobody mistakes, for example, that someone who uses a forklift to lift a 300-pound bar or pays a friend to do it for them is getting their reps in at the gym because it's intrinsically obvious that the work of moving metal has no value, but is instead meant to induce an internal change in the athlete. Using Chat on an assignment is no different from hiring a forklift to do your workout, but people seem to want to get confused about it.
The ability to cheat on written assignments has always been a possibility. Right. And you have also always gotten a big fat F when you cheat.
I used to pay a classmate to write my papers. He'd just write 2 different ones. I even had a classmate take a physics midterm for me, after taking his own earlier in the day. The fact that professors don't check the identity of the person handing a paper in versus the name on the test is insanity. But thanks for the good grade, I guess.
The amount of non-technical people who have very little intuition around the limitations of LLMs is actually fairly startling, and I like to think of myself as someone who is usually good at that kind of thing. The realistic coherence of the output is just so convincing. People cannot seem to stop themselves from attributing a theory of mind to it. Just earlier this week I saw someone saying that they were creating a ton of OpenAI accounts to try to advocate to Chat for their activist cause.
How many people believe horoscopes and astrology carry any meaning? Most will never comprehend LLMs or even the simplest concepts of machine learning.
By asking ChatGPT if it's ChatGPT generated. WTF. Even the dedicated detectors don't work well.
This is what you get by hyping Chat without making clear what it does, can do, and cannot do.
I'm noticing an extremely strong trend of this. It's surprisingly common to see people on Twitter use a chat screenshot as a source for statistics or facts that aren't correct.
Remember when people didn't trust Wikipedia? They actually taught us about references and primary sources. Then we all kind of forgot, or got lazy. Same thing with this. Even if the bots list sources, we won't read them. We barely read what the bot says to begin with.
One of the possible outcomes of the current trends is that we may rediscover the need for a strongly curated knowledge base as a common reference of conversational truth. E.g., a classic encyclopedia, advisably more than a single one. I've seen the same exact thing in HN comments, where someone copied stats directly from Chat and then cited Chat.
This is what you get if you can't make teachers embrace technology. Make it mandatory to use Chat for writing aid. Do live tests to prove true knowledge.
For years we've had a strong trend to make even the basic workings of a computer appear like magic, and users not bothering how it does what. Now it may be a bit too much to expect a teacher to understand how LLMs work, and what the consequences are. E.g., do they know how a file system works? What happens when they move a document from one folder to another? We may have to revise how we present computers, and how they should be perceived, from pseudo-magic ease of use to ease of understanding, what is done, and how this is achieved.
The majority of normal users haven't really grasped stuff like how to use the file system. And I mean at a very basic level. The entire time I've been computing since the early 90s, let alone how it works. I'm not sure it's a trend unless the trend is more people using computers. More of a static state of most people not understanding or caring to understand stuff that geeks like us have long forgotten we ever had to learn.
To the teachers I know, I've been recommending that if they are paranoid about GPT, they can ask the students to cite material from a physical textbook in their assignments. Even if the students type the textbook into Chat, at least they read the material. This is beside the point of whether current education needs to be improved, and whether GPT is going to force some change here, but this is a useful stopgap. Teachers who take an approach like OP need to be stopped.
As someone who was a student over a decade ago, I'd lose my fucking mind if I had to use physical books. There was simply not enough time to go get books off the shelf and complete all my assignments. Everything was done digitally. I can't think of a single exception in college. I once turned in a math exam written using LaTeX, and the professor initially declined to grade it. I did concede that I hadn't followed the directions. Handwritten answers only, but the professor did eventually grade it.
Huh? What major were you? As a math major, we used exclusively physical books, and it was fine. There was one time that the professor wanted us to use a theorem in a homework assignment from a book he neglected to assign to us for the class. The entire class collaborated on that problem set and emailed him for help, and he admitted he'd made a mistake and lent us a copy of the book. That was probably the biggest can't use the internet mishap, but then again the rest of that set still took us about 24 hours to solve, including with the TAR's help, and the professor ended up cancelling the last homework out of 5 total, because the 4th one was too hard. That was a great class. I once turned in a math exam written using LaTeX, and the professor initially declined to grade it. This is just weird though. I used LaTeX for the majority of my homeworks, and also exams. It was about an even split between LaTeX and handwriting, for math people yerk.
I was a student more like 20 years ago. I had a lot of physical books as well. There's different use cases. If you were searching for a specific piece of information, digital all the way. If you are trying to digest material in a linear fashion, I find a physical book works better for me. Less distractions.
Chat can cite physical textbooks though.
It can certainly make up things that look like citations. It definitely cannot produce a series of valid inline citations for specific quotes, rephrasings, or statistics.
This is dumb as fuck. The said teacher should know that Chat will give lots of false positives.
Said teacher is one person in a large crowd of people that are now using Chat as a modern-day quiver of divining arrows. I am not hopeful for the future if people are so ready to give up their own thinking to machines, who may develop emergent motives.
This doesn't sound like he's failing the entire class. If you are happy with your grade, simply do not turn in the next assignment.
This doesn't sound like he's failing the entire class. In the email he also says, I am giving everyone in the class an X. X, grade not submitted. If you do not assign a grade, an X defined as grade not submitted is automatically assigned. No student can graduate with an X on his/her academic record. I think the term fails is wrong in the title, but he is essentially blocking them from graduating at this time.
The threads show that Chat claims to have written anything if you ask it to. So it really doesn't matter what the student submits, Chat will claim it.
The next assignment will be run through Chat as well, with presumably the same results, resulting in failure and escalation to the Academic Dishonesty Office.
I'm sure the professor is falling back on some sort of honor code chicanery, where you are required to report cheating of fellow classmates if you are aware of cheating.
I can't read the op, but it seems quite impressive if the matriculation rules already have must not use AI assistance in them. Would be interested in the particular wording too. If you use Chat search tool, does that disqualify you? What about if your spreadsheet app used AI to choose the best graph type? You use Chat FUF. Are they saying it is plagiarism? Would students know that it was considered that way? You've not copied, and ChatGPT isn't a source as such.
All of my CS classes already have rules against AI, though they had a head start from Copilot. A couple other non-STEM courses as well.
Instead of failing them on this assignment, why not make them do an oral presentation and grade this assignment on that, if there is doubt? Failing them completely seems a bit heavy-handed and unfair. Surely some did leverage chat, but likely not all did so.
This might not be feasible depending on the size of the class. I had classes with 100-200 students. Most problems with education are simply due to scale. The most notable one being Bloom's finding that private tutoring produced 2 standard deviations, better results than classroom education. We can kind of approximate that now with GPT. 1 tutor per child.
Because this is a bad teacher not interested in doing their job.
Were expectations set ahead of time? Don't cheat. If so, he's actually the best kind of teacher, allowing them to experience the real world, but with soft consequences.
Been saying this for a while. There are very simple and effective ways to teach your class that can't be cheated with AI. These professors are simply lazy and uncreative.
Speaking as an assistant professor in theoretical CS, I see there are many bad approaches in the original post and mentioned in this discussion, but I strongly disagree with. There are very simple and effective ways to teach your class that can't be cheated with AI. These professors are simply lazy and uncreative. I can attest to the following problems to good homework creation, from my own experiences playing with ChatGPT and teaching. If you want to give a very illustrative yet easy theoretical exercise in algorithm design, one that computer scientists have solved over and over in the last few decades, and which furthers your understanding, there are very likely solutions online, and ChatGPT will give you the solution with very high probability. If you create your own dataset, and want the students to implement some algorithm, and create a simple plot discussion from the results, it will be very hard to distinguish a student solved it on their own, but they did not invest too much time into it. Submissions from ChatGPT submissions, produced by a couple of queries. Switching to oral presentations is hard to scale, as others attest, and also does not resolve much, because some students are perfectly okay with being handed a solution from somewhere. Colleague, ChatGPT, not understanding it very well, and yet presenting it. Failing these students likely leads to overly difficult classes. In-classroom exams without a computer work best, but they also do not scale very well. A lot of prep correction needs to go into them, and some students with bad anxiety management skills, which includes me as a former student, dislike them passionately. As you can see, this topic is quite critical for my profession. The ugly truth is that university professors have only a very limited time allocated in their busy work weeks for teaching, and hence they have to take many shortcuts, including suboptimal homework sheets and limited innovation year over year. I also do not allocate as much time for philosophy of teaching, improving teaching skills, as I would have liked. If anyone here has novel ideas how to actually implement a class that can't be cheated with AI, specifically university CS classes, I am all ears.
At this point you can replace professor and university with ChatGPT. For well-documented topics, like math languages, it gives pretty good explanations. I use it to study new programming language and AI.
We already know it can't actually do math, and it'll bald-faced lie to you about facts, so I don't think that's actually a great idea.
It is not a calculator, but can explain concepts in math pretty well. It does not lie about well-documented facts, such as basic university course. It needs a lot of training data. And if student cannot recognize their teacher is bullshitting them, there is a bigger problem.